Every year, countless stories flood our feeds. Long lost family members, separated by circumstance, finally reunited, identical twins, adopted into different families, meeting for the first time as adults. We watch, captivated, as they embrace, marveling at the uncanny similarities, the shared gestures, the way their laughter echoes each other's. They often speak of an instant connection, a profound sense of knowing that transcends their lack of shared memories. We celebrate these reunions, touched by the enduring power of family, by the almost mystical pull of biological kinship. But pause for a moment. Think about the infrastructure that makes such a reunion possible today. DNA tests that trace ancestry across continents, birth records, adoption agencies, social media networks, news outlets, a whole modern world built on documentation and communication, on the ability to find and verify identities. We take it completely for granted. Now, strip all of that away. Erase every record, every photograph, every digital footprint. Imagine identical twin infants born into a small nomadic hunter-gatherer band 70,000 years ago, somewhere in the vast, untamed plains of ancient Africa. Perhaps a raiding party scatters their group, or a sudden flood separates a mother from one of her babies. One twin is lost, carried away, perhaps adopted by another distant clan, while the other remains with their birth family. Decades pass. The lost twin grows up in a foreign group, under a different sky, learning different customs. The surviving twin grows up with a ghost, a story, a faint memory. Then one day, perhaps during a rare gathering of tribes or a chance encounter while tracking game, two adults cross paths. They look, at first glance, strikingly similar. A shared jawline, the same curve of the nose, identical eyes. Could they possibly be brothers? Sisters? Could two identical twins, separated as infants, ever recognize each other again if they met as adults in the deep past? How would they know? What would that recognition feel like in a world where every stranger was a potential threat and every connection was forged in the crucible of daily survival? The problem of identifying kin in ancient times was monumental, far more complex than our modern minds can easily grasp. For us, a long-lost relative is a heartwarming mystery. For our ancestors, it was a profound, often deadly challenge. Imagine the sheer scale of the world then. No maps, no roads, just endless, unmarked territory. A small child, lost or taken, could vanish into a vast wilderness, never to be seen again. Even if they survived, how far might they travel? How many groups might they pass through? And what about the individual themselves? We see photos of twins today, pristine and well-fed, their identical features preserved. But in the ancient world, decades of sun, wind, scarce food, disease, and constant physical exertion would have sculpted and scarred a body. A twin raised in a harsh desert might be lean and weathered, while their sibling in a more fertile valley might appear stronger, less scarred. Would the underlying genetic blueprint still shine through? Or would the environment have carved two entirely different people from the same genetic clay? Furthermore, communication itself was a barrier. Bands were small and often isolated. Dialects shifted rapidly across even short distances, creating linguistic chasms. A lost child, raised in another group, would speak a different tongue, understand different gestures. How do you bridge that gap, not just of language, but of culture and experience, to establish a bond of kinship with someone who is both profoundly familiar and utterly foreign? The stakes were incredibly high. Misidentifying a stranger as kin could lead to betrayal, resource drain, or even violence. Missing a true kin could mean losing a vital ally, a genetic connection that might have strengthened the group. Humans, at our core, are intensely social creatures. Our survival has always depended on cooperation, on the strength of our bonds. But unlike many other animals, we didn't evolve a simple, foolproof chemical signal for kin recognition. Think of ants, who can identify nestmates by scent alone, or many mammals who use pheromones to distinguish family members from strangers. Our sense of smell, while powerful, isn't quite as reliable for conscious kin identification over long distances or long periods of separation. Instead, we developed incredibly sophisticated cognitive abilities for recognizing individuals, complex face processing, voice recognition, and the ability to learn and remember social cues. This reliance on learned recognition rather than innate chemical signals was a double-edged sword. It allowed for incredible flexibility in social structures and adaptation to diverse environments. But it also meant that identifying a long-lost relative, someone whose face had matured, whose voice had changed, and whose mannerisms had been shaped by an entirely different upbringing, became a deeply complex puzzle. The evolutionary pressure for kin recognition was immense. It dictated who you shared food with, who you defended, who you could trust, and with whom you could safely reproduce. We needed to know who our people were, but how did our ancestors, without any of our modern tools, possibly navigate this profound challenge of identifying kin when decades and vast distances stood between them? The solution, it turns out, was not a single trick, but a layered, ingenious system built on observation, instinct, and something far more subtle than a simple DNA match. Imagine the scene. A lone figure emerges from the shimmering heat of the savannah or the dense shadows of the forest. Years, perhaps decades, have passed since they were last seen. The face is etched with time, the body hardened by countless suns and bitter winds. They approach your camp, a stranger. But something, a faint echo in your ancient mind stirs, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps just a primal alarm. Your hand instinctively tightens on your spear. This wasn't a simple matter of curiosity, this was life or death. For our ancestors, the moment of potential kin recognition was a high-wire act performed without a net. It began not with a conscious thought, but with a cascade of subconscious signals. The human brain, a masterpiece of pattern recognition, would instantly begin comparing every new face, every new gait, every new voice against a vast, intricate library of stored memories. But these weren't just perfect snapshots. They were fluid, dynamic mental models, constantly updated, allowing for the inevitable changes wrought by time and hardship. The eyes were the first gate. Not just the color, but the shape of the eye socket, the way the brows furrowed, the unique constellation of wrinkles that formed around the corners when they smiled or squinted. It was the expression that truly mattered. A mouth might be different, a jawline more pronounced, but the way a person laughed, the specific muscles that tensed around their eyes in genuine amusement, these were often deeply ingrained, inherited, or developed from shared early experiences. This was the core of family resemblance, not a static portrait, but a living, breathing echo of familiar movements. Then came the voice. Even across a clearing, a particular timbre, a certain cadence in their speech could send a jolt through you. The way a sibling might clear their throat before speaking, the specific rhythm of their laughter, the unique inflection in a question. These were auditory fingerprints, often retained with surprising fidelity even after years of silence. And as they drew closer, other senses would engage, though often below the threshold of conscious awareness. The way they carried themselves, the slight tilt of the head, the familiar swing of an arm when walking. These micro-behaviors, often subtle genetic or culturally imprinted traits, acted as silent witnesses, whispering possibilities to the ancient mind. But these were just hints, fragile threads in a tapestry of doubt. The true test often began with interaction. A question, a shared glance, a moment of observation. Our ancestors didn't have DNA tests, but they had something equally powerful: shared narrative. Do you remember the year the big river dried up? Do you remember the old woman who told stories of the sky people? These were not just questions, they were keys to unlock shared memories, to test the very fabric of a common past. A true kin would not just recall the event, but perhaps the feeling, the specific details, the shared fear or joy. They would have the context, the emotional resonance that a stranger, however well informed, could never truly replicate. This was the core of the ancient human kin recognition protocol, a multisensory, cognitive, and social gauntlet. It demanded acute observation, a deep well of memory, and an almost intuitive understanding of human behavior. It was a dance of hesitant approach and wary assessment, a test of shared history, a test of the subtle, invisible threads that bound a family together even across vast stretches of time and distance. The stakes of misidentification were too high to rely on a single cue. It wasn't enough to look like kin, you had to feel like kin, sound like kin, and most importantly, remember like kin. Imagine the tension in that moment. The stranger, perhaps a long-lost twin, standing before the community. The elders, the parents, the siblings, all scrutinizing, searching for that undeniable spark. The air thick with unspoken questions. Could this truly be the child lost to the great flood? The brother taken by raiders? The sister who wandered off in the long drought? Their eyes would meet, searching for something deeper than surface features. They would seek not just a familiar face, but a familiar soul, a resonance of shared experience that transcended the physical changes of time. And then, a subtle gesture, a way of holding their hands, a specific turn of phrase, a remembered childhood nickname, or perhaps even a scar from a forgotten accident. A secret, shared mark known only to the closest family. This was often the moment the dam broke. Not a scientific confirmation, but a deeply emotional one. A recognition that wasn't just cognitive, but visceral. A profound, almost overwhelming feeling that connected the present stranger to the ghost of a past loved one. But even if that connection was made, even if the tears flowed and the embrace was tight, a new, daunting question immediately arose. What now? How do you reintegrate someone who has lived an entire lifetime apart? Someone whose experiences have shaped them into a person utterly unknown to the tribe, yet undeniably, genetically, one of their own. The reunion was just the beginning of another, even more complex journey, because ancient societies understood something profound. Mere genetic relation, while powerful, was not enough to guarantee belonging. Survival wasn't just about blood, it was about shared experience, shared knowledge, and an unbreakable social contract. So, what happened next? The returning stranger, even if recognized as kin, faced a period of intense scrutiny and re-socialization. It was a test, not of loyalty, but of compatibility. Imagine a child lost for years, now a young adult. Their language might be different, their customs alien, their very way of thinking shaped by another world. How could they contribute to the hunt, the gathering, the defense of the group, if they didn't know the local terrain, the seasonal migrations, the intricate social rules? The core solution wasn't immediate, unconditional acceptance, but a gradual, deliberate process of reintegration, often guided by the wisdom of the elders. Anthropological studies of modern hunter-gatherers offer a window into this ancient practice. A returning member, or even a welcome stranger, would often be observed not just for their intentions, but for their skills and their understanding of the group's specific culture. They might be asked to demonstrate knowledge of local plants, to participate in a hunt, or to share stories that prove their origins and shared heritage. This wasn't about suspicion, it was about ensuring the survival of the whole. A group couldn't afford a weak link, or someone who unknowingly broke sacred taboos. And here's where some surprising revelations emerge. First, ancient humans relied on what we might call a social genome, a vast, intricate web of shared stories, myths, rituals, and practical knowledge that was as crucial to their identity and survival as their biological DNA. Someone could be genetically related, but socially alien, lacking this vital cultural software. Relearning this social genome was paramount. Second, the human capacity for social memory, honed over millennia, was astonishingly sophisticated. It wasn't just about remembering faces, but about recalling nuances of personality, specific shared moments, even the way someone laughed or held their head. This deep well of collective memory, often stored and recounted by elders, acted as a living archive, verifying claims and validating identities. It was a communal effort to remember, because remembering was survival. Third, the very concept of family in these ancient contexts wasn't solely defined by genetics, but by contribution and commitment to the group. If a long-lost twin returned, but refused to adapt or posed a threat, their genetic ties might not override the community's need for cohesion and safety. This highlights a profound truth. Belonging was earned, not just inherited. Fourth, the physical and emotional scars of separation could be immense. Someone who had been lost to another tribe or suffered trauma might return fundamentally changed, making the process of recognition and reintegration exponentially harder. The group had to navigate not just a stranger's return, but sometimes a stranger's new identity, forged in hardship. Finally, the acceptance of a long-lost individual often came with a new social role, carefully negotiated. They might not immediately reclaim their old status, but would earn a new place based on their contributions and their renewed commitment to the collective. It was a testament to the flexibility and pragmatism of ancient human societies. These ancient struggles echo in our modern lives more than we realize. Think of the intense emotions surrounding family reunions, especially after long absences, the subtle cues we look for, the shared stories we recount to reestablish connection, the awkwardness when someone has changed beyond recognition. Our deeply ingrained need to belong, to be recognized and accepted by our tribe, still drives much of our social behavior. We still instinctively seek out shared history, common ground, and emotional resonance to build trust, whether with a new colleague, a potential partner, or a long-lost relative. The modern fear of being an outsider, or the joy of finding our people, are primal echoes of these ancient survival instincts. Ultimately, the story of the separated twin isn't just about recognition. It's a profound narrative about what it means to be human. It's about the deep, intricate tapestry of memory, community, and identity that binds us together. It reminds us that our very humanity is forged, not just in our biology, but in the stories we share, the challenges we overcome together, and the enduring power of connection. In a world that often feels fractured, perhaps remembering these ancient bonds can remind us of what truly connects us. What do you believe truly defines family beyond blood? Share your thoughts below, and if these journeys into our past illuminate your present, consider joining us for more explorations into the human story.